Good afternoon. I am Rachel Weintraub, Legislative Director and General Counsel for Consumer Federation of America. Welcome. It is my honor to introduce Representative Chuy García to kick off our high-cost lending lobby campaign, a virtual effort focused on building support for H.R. 5050 S-2833, the Veterans and Consumers Fair Credit Act. This bill would establish a national rate cap extending the protections offered to service members by the Military Lending Act to veterans and all consumers. Representative Garcia is the original co-sponsor of this critically important legislation, and we are so grateful for the Congressman's leadership and presence here today, launching our campaign to build support and convey the dire need for this bill to become law. Representative Garcia has spent his entire career seeking to protect the vulnerable. Through representing the 4th Congressional District of Illinois, the Congressman has been a progressive voice fighting to improve the lives of his working class neighbors, many of whom are immigrants like him. He is a coalition builder committed to expanding access to quality education, affordable housing, and economic opportunity. He currently serves as a member of the influential Financial Services Committee, Natural Resources Committee, and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. He previously served as Cook County Commissioner, where he spearheaded a ban on discriminatory practices involving landlords limiting lease opportunities for people who rely on housing choice vouchers. Congressman Garcia also served in the Illinois Senate from 1993 to 1999, where he passed legislation to protect immigrants against abusive fees from notary republics and legislation to make interpreters available to hospital patients with limited English language abilities. Prior to that, he was a member of the Chicago City Council, where he passed an ordinance to help immigrants complete green card applications. Congressman Garcia was born in Los Pinos, a small village in the Mexican state of Durango. He came to the United States with his family in 1965 with permanent resident status to join his father, who worked in the fields during the Bracero program and later in a cold storage plant in Chicago. He still remembers the first American meal he had, a bologna sandwich from a roadside diner in Texas. Congressman Garcia and his wife, Evelyn, live in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood. They have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Consumer Federation of America is so honored to welcome Congressman Garcia today as we launch our effort to build support for the Veterans and Consumers Fair Credit Act. Congressman Garcia.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that very generous introduction. And of course, good afternoon. And thank you to everyone who is here today. I'm proud to join you for the kickoff of the CFA's high-cost lending lobbying campaign. I know I don't need to tell you this, but it is urgent that Congress address predatory lending. We're in the middle of a historic pandemic and a historic economic crisis. And if people in this country can't get out of the endless cycle of debt, recovery will be impossible. I represent a working class immigrant district on the northwest and southwest side of Chicago with the suburban communities connector. COVID-19 has caused a lot of new hardship in my community. The virus set a lot of people back. For example, most of my constituents are renters. They need the eviction moratorium, but the rent is still due every month and it's piling up. Many of my constituents never received the stimulus payments that Congress passed in the CARES Act. And it included, because they don't have a social security number or are from mixed status families. So that is how people in my community are being affected. So countless workers in my neighborhood lost wages because they got sick or had to care for a family member. So times have been especially hard lately. Everyone in Chicago is struggling. But high cost loans make these times harder for my constituents than they might be for someone on the other side of town. We know that high-cost lenders target low-income communities and especially Black and brown communities like mine. They don't hide it. Every time a lobbyist for the industry talks to me, they mention how many shops their client has in my district and how many customers they have in my neighborhood. But many of these loans have interest rates over 300% and trap borrowers in a cycle of debt they can't repay. That's not sustainable for anyone, certainly not the working families. And Congress must step in to protect consumers like my constituents because the Trump administration isn't going to do it. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau is essentially working for lenders. It's even falsified its own data to undermine consumer protections. It is an outrage that the Bureau gutted its payday lending rule. It is absurd that lenders can make loans even if they know for sure that the consumer will never be able to repay them. But it doesn't have to be this way. The Military Lending Act has protected active duty service members from predatory loans for over a decade by setting a 36% interest cap for consumer finance products. It works. The people who serve our country in uniform can get the loans they need without getting caught up in cycles of debt. It's time we start looking after the military families, veterans, and the general public in the same way. I'm proud to sponsor the bipartisan Veterans and Consumers Fair Credit Act, and I underscore bipartisan. My bill provides a simple solution to a simple problem that causes real hardship in my community. If we're going to recover from the COVID-19 economic crisis, then families in communities like mine have to break out of this cycle of debt. Congress needs to act, and I'm glad that you are going to make some noise this week to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we very much are going to be making noise over the next few weeks to convey how incredibly important this legislation is, especially now. Now I'd like to open up the Q&A to questions. If someone has a question, please type it in and I will call your name and we will unmute you. I will start right now with a question that I have prepared. Congressman Garcia, what would you say the biggest problem is with high-cost loans?
High-cost loans carry higher interest rates and therefore cost more money to pay back. They can become an unmanageable loan very quickly. These loans are aimed at customers who can't access credit in other ways. Poor and working class people, and especially people of color. Customers have a hard time paying off these high cost loans and often end up taking out new loans, can you believe that, to pay off the loans they already have. They quickly get trapped in a debt cycle they can't get out of because of the high, impossible, and unfair interest rates.
I have another question for you. Actually from Joshua Denbow. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. Can Joshua be unmuted?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And you nailed my last name perfectly. Congratulations. You get like a button or something. So I do a lot of consumer rights work, mostly in state court, but some in federal. What made a big change in the Truth in Lending Act was 1639F, which imposed a requirement that, this was 2010, it didn't save the Great Recession people. They imposed a requirement that the lender at the time of closing make an assessment as to whether or not the borrower could pay without resort to the collateral, being the house in the case of the Truth in Lending Act. Is there going to be a similar type requirement for unsecured lenders?
I believe that the bill does provide for that. Again, the big problem that people encounter in communities where there aren't lenders because of the historic disinvestment that many communities have experienced is to go to these places because they're there. So we believe that that is important, and I think that the bill provides for that. I don't know if what my staff person is on the call, if you'd be able to join us.
Or if you'd like, Congressman, this is Lauren Saunders at the National Consumer Law Center. Thank you so much for joining us. The bill is just focused on an interest rate cap, so it does not specifically impose an ability to pay requirement. But we do believe that it will give a strong incentive for lenders to consider ability to repay, because for smaller loans, if you can only charge a reasonable interest rate, it aligns the incentives of the lender and the borrower, so they rise, they succeed together or fall together. Where with predatory loans, they don't care if you eventually default, if they can still make a profit.
Right, so you're backing into the means test by imposing that limit. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
is that an APR limit or a flat interest rate? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we're also seeking to make a point to the public and certainly to members of Congress and to members of the committee that people have other places they can go to where they're not going to get gouged with these horrific interest rates, that these interest rates are usury, that they are immoral, and they also have a disproportionate effect on poor communities and communities of color in particular. So with all of the talk about there being a need for greater equity in our society, this is a really good place to start.
Can I make one last question?
Of course, Josh.
Okay, thanks. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I've litigated it at the New Jersey state level a number of times. The New Jersey state statute is absurdly written, and the courts just are very reluctant to enforce it. How do I get involved and get behind this? This is important to me. This topic, this bill.
Rachel, I'll let you.
Sure. Well, first of all, being here is a great first step. CFA has been prioritizing this bill along with many allies such as AFR and NCLC and others. So engage in this lobby effort. We're happy to talk to you about specifically what needs to happen in New Jersey, and we're going to talk about this later, but essentially we need to get as many co-sponsors on this bill as possible to build support. So that's our immediate goal now.
Great.
And then sort of to build on that, Congressman Garcia, what would you say? So many of us are about to embark on a few weeks of virtual lobbying, building support, explaining to members of Congress how incredibly important this bill is, especially now. What advice do you have for advocates as we're about to engage in this effort at this time?
You know, the country has experienced an unprecedented consciousness raising and awareness process like we haven't seen in decades. And at the core of why people have been protesting peacefully all over the country, and it's been an expression of diversity and multiracial and multi-ethnic solidarity with Black lives, the issue of inequities in our society and the historic disinvestment that communities have suffered for a long time. This is an issue of economic justice. This is an issue of financial justice. And it really begins to shine a light on the condition of communities that have suffered from historic disinvestment, whether it was segregation or redlining and corporations not investing in many communities and neighborhoods across the country, in cities and even in suburban areas, especially over the past few decades. So this is an important issue of financial and economic justice and equity. So getting rid of, laws that are immoral like this, and, the big ripoff because of usurious financial instruments and products that are allowed on the market is one way to stand up for greater equity in our society, especially for the lowest income communities and working class communities across the country.
Great, thank you. We have many great questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them. We will likely answer a number of them later in the training, so apologies for not getting to all of them. But let's go to BG Jim Barrelly, who has a question about challenges. BG,
Yes.
are you there?
My name is Jim Barley. I'm a retired Brigadier General, United States Army, 32 years. It's kind of a two-part question that deals with the passage of the bill. What objections do you expect in the House committee? And what objections you see on the full floor with this bill? And how can we help you overcome those issues that will be identified?
Excellent questions and points that you make, sir. First, I'd like to say that we've come across arguments from some of the members of the committee who have said that if we, pass legislation like this, that some of those predatory lenders in minority communities are going to close shop and they will leave, and that communities will be left without places to get credit, access to dollars that they may need for an emergency. I think that's one of the arguments that I've heard that, I've been pretty, they seem pretty incredulous, but nevertheless, they're being made. In other words, that we're going to create these credit deserts in poor communities. I think we want to respond to arguments like that by saying that nothing like that happened when the Military Lending Act was enacted, and that what it did is it helped service members and veterans and their families not only have access to fair interest rate products, but it didn't result in anything like that. So helping us to dispel those types of perceptions or conclusions that members of the committee or in Congress can make would be really, really important. This has been, the Military Lending Act has been a concrete example of what can happen, that if it was good for military families, it's good for families across the country, and that it's time to extend those protections and those opportunities to all consumers across the country.
Yeah, we've had that issue in Indiana because they've tried to pass bills similar to if you will, expand on payday lending type of opportunities. And that is, in our state legislature, representatives and senators both have brought forth that we'd have these deserts. The fallacy in this, I believe, is that certain people should not be allowed to get credit. They can't afford credit. And all we do by lending them money at outrageous interest rates is put them deeper and deeper in debt, and eventually they'll declare bankruptcy. We had a senator say that, so what else should we do? Should we bring back the jails like we had during the revolutionary days and put people in jail? My response to him is that, in fact, we have those today, and in our legislative laws, we may not physically put you in jail, but declaring you bankruptcy and ruining your credit and your job opportunities, destroying your life, is in essence like putting you in jail. Some positive things I think that should be considered is positive actions to promote companies and promote ways of helping those people in need. Faith communities. We see Walmart, for example, does a great job, and they will give employees advances on their pay. And they're certainly not, upper income people. So that would be a great incentive. Maybe the federal government, maybe an amendment or part of this legislation would be to incentivize businesses to help the low income people with such things. A couple of other ideas that we've presented in Indiana that I'd like to share with you is that we have companies, not-for-profits, where businesses in the community put money into a pot, if you went to a pool, and that's used to give low interest or no interest loans to people in communities. But those people have to go to some financial education and build a budget and come back with a payment plan for them. Church organizations have helped along the way in this area as well. And to me, those are some great things that I don't see politicians doing. We want to protect the consumer, but then we make ourselves subject to these arguments. Well, we're not protecting the consumer, we're creating a desert in this arena. I contend there are positive things that we could do, like the Walmart, a Walmart employer promotion, like a government private industry solution in a community where they get together and maybe provide from a government perspective, state or federal, some guarantees in the loans, some financial assistance to help them be successful in the community so that the interest rates can stay low for the consumer, yet we can promote raising everybody up in that community by establishing good quality credit. Your comments, sir.
Those are excellent ideas that you bring to the fore that we should consider. Financial education is at the, and literacy is at the core of, people understanding how to become bankable, how to have a good credit score, how to build up assets. So General, you have brought some great ideas to this conversation. I know my staff is paying close attention to this session this afternoon, and we certainly will take that into consideration. Finally, I really appreciate you bringing in the role that faith communities can play in exposing these ridiculous interest rates that we're saddling people with, and as you said, driving people into a form of debtor prisons because they can't afford to pay the horrific interest rates that they're being saddled with. That is a form of, incarcerating people in financial jails or debtor jails, I think was the term that you use. So thank you for bringing that, enriching the conversation this afternoon. Those are excellent points that I think can be used in the lobbying. This is a very crucial time. There are 53 days to the election, and it's an important time to make an important impression on members of the committee. Over the next few weeks, we'll be setting an agenda for the next Congress that will put this country on the path to recovery. So your senators and representatives need to hear from you. They are going to be hearing from a lot of lenders and lobbyists, but you know what your community needs. So don't be afraid to tell them, and to tell them again and again if you need to. And certainly the arguments that you put forth are very useful in my opinion.
Great. Well, we are out of time. Congressman Garcia, that was an excellent closing. Thank you so much for your leadership, and we really hope that these next 2 weeks will continue to support you and support consumers and get us closer to this bill becoming law. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel, and to all the members of the CFA.